Good evening. This is Gloria Taylor Brown, and this is the 22nd edition of A Gathering of Priestesses. And we have with us this evening the lovely and Miss Andrea Goodman. We also have Catherine Ravenwood sitting in. She may be taking over for me. I'm having a little bit of bronchitis, and occasionally I just cough too loud for the microphone. So she's going to hang in there, and if she has something to say, we'll include her in the conversation. I want to thank all of you for being present. I see that Ione has signed in, and Risa, and several others. I know that there's more of you coming. I want to thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. This is, we've been working on this for a while, and one of the things we're working on is, of course, the magazine that's going to go with us. And I spent most of the day today working on laying out the magazine, and I'm very pleased with how it's turning out. So I just want you to know it is coming. It is being worked on, and it's like everything in life. It's taking twice as long as it's supposed to. So anyway, we will begin tonight, as we begin all of our conversations, with asking Andrea, what drew you to the path of being a priestess?
Well, first, I just want to say hello and thank you, Gloria, for asking me to be on the show again. I'm really thrilled about this evening, and thank you everyone who is tuning in, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to speak with Raven as well. And my story that I told before was, I mentioned that I felt that being a priestess was my acorn, in the sense of James Hillman's book, The Soul's Code, where he says that everyone is born with their acorn, and then the experiences of their life nurture that acorn and help it grow into the tree that it's to be. And in my earlier life, I was raised Jewish and was very active as the religious chairman of the youth group, which meant that I wrote my own prayers, and eventually, with a dear friend, wrote services and performed them, not having any clue that I would someday be creating ceremonies and rituals and performing them in a sacred context that was not Jewish. So I feel that that was a foreshadowing. And then there have been many steps along the way of recognizing the sacred context that is meaningful to me. But I would say that when I met Ione in 1983 and began working with her on dreams and journals, and then the tarot cards, and speaking of the goddess, and then eventually going to Egypt, that really awakened me, and that in Egypt was when I first really felt, I knew that I was a priestess. I felt what it felt like to be a priestess, and I remember that moment vividly. And then we worked together for many years and began teaching together in women's mysteries. And in 1997, she had the idea to create a ministry and asked me to help to found that ministry. So we made a vessel, a container for the work we were doing that really claimed the female authority, that we have a ministry, we are priestesses or ministers, and we are legitimate in the sense that I perform weddings and funerals and various coming-of-age ceremonies for people. But for me, when I began to really, once I was ordained and began to really identify as a priestess, it made sense of all the various things that I was doing, because I was performing, singing, and I was teaching voice lessons and doing vocal sound healing and teaching that work. and doing astrology readings for people, and teaching astrology, doing ceremonies, having retreats. All of these activities come together as priestess. They're all priestess work. And then I also feel that tending my hearth is priestess work, and tending my garden is priestess work, and cooking. That really there isn't anything I do that doesn't fit that identity as a priestess. So I'm very, very grateful to claim it.
Now, you started with sound healing whenever you were in your, I presume, your 20s. So that was something that predated your work with Ione. But it was something that obviously brought you two together, because I noticed that you were in her play, Io and, how does the title go?
Io and Her and the Trouble with Him.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, I wouldn't say that that was sound healing that I began with. It was performing, but it was performing music, the music of Meredith Monk, and without words. So we were really using our voices as instruments. And the voice teacher that I studied with, when I came to him, I was already performing with Meredith. So even though I practiced singing with classical music, he knew that I was using my voice in unusual ways, and he helped me to be able to do the music I was already performing. He helped me develop strength and flexibility and range, and to know my instrument. So I feel that my voice teacher helped me find my instrument and helped me develop my instrument, and Meredith gave me a vocabulary of sound, sound itself, that has resonance, not just sound resonance, but metaphoric resonance. That there's a poetry of sound that we were singing that's not like any other music that I had heard before I met her. So that was a background that then I could really apply when it came to sound healing, because in the sound healing I have a clear intention, and then I trust my instrument to fulfill that intention. And when I'm teaching it, I always say to people, any sound is the right sound. So there's no hierarchy of beautiful, ugly. It's not like certain sounds are better than other sounds. That because when you're doing healing work, sometimes you need a sound that energizes or shocks, or sometimes you need a sound that grounds, or that gives stability. And so you might be on the same note for a really long time, and musically you might not choose that, but in terms of healing, it's what's needed. And that when we do sound healing, we open ourselves to be instruments, to be sung through.
Okay.
Does that
helps. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sound healing has not been something that I particularly followed. I mean, I was kicked out of the Baptist choir when I was 9 years old. They said I was too loud. And so I always thought I had no voice as far as singing was concerned. And whenever I was in college and I was in performing arts, I had a very heavy Oklahoma Southern accent. And I was going to school back east, and they really advised me to lose the accent quickly. And I had a voice teacher who was from Long Island that was my voice teacher, who had a beautiful Shakespearean voice until he got mad, and then he sounded like he was from Long Island. So, but he actually said one of the things to me that, it's kind of weird, that has, for me, always been the thing that took away any fear of being on stage or any fear of being on this. He'd say, go out there and get them, kid. They can't kill you and they can't eat you. every time before we'd go out. And, you know, it's true. People go, oh, I'm so terrified of speaking on stage or whatever. It's like, yeah, well, they can't kill you. You know, the worst thing they can do is get up and walk out, and that's their choice. So, you know, I always want to encourage people to, since I was discouraged so early on from the idea that I had any kind of voice to be used, and I want to encourage anyone who thinks that they too do not have a voice, that all our voices count, and we want you to, you know, use your voice, whether it's for sound healing or for speaking or for singing. And I think that Andrea's work is so important that I really want to highlight that and highlight the idea that we're, you know, coming together to bring our voices together, because that's what it is about. Because the reason for the gathering of priestesses is so we can bring our voices together, so we can be heard, and to create a new sound in the world. And I think that's. Would you agree with me?
Yes, I would agree with you, and I think of it. I think of it in terms of cosmic harmony, of Mahat, of the Netert Mahat, that she's the embodiment of the cosmic harmony. That there is a whole universe, and everything in the universe is necessary. That there's nothing left out. That every single pebble and star is part of the whole, and each of us, and that there is a music being continually made by everything that is, as it gives off its vibration. And Mahat is the one that is orchestrating. She's balancing and finding how all of that works together. And that's bigger than we are. We don't really know how all of it works together, but we're all essential to it, each one of us. So when we offer ourselves and allow our voices to come out, then I feel that she is the one who is singing through us, that she is conducting this orchestra, or this vast symphony that we're all a part of.
I know that, you know, there's been the idea of the music of the spheres going back into the time of the Greeks and the Romans, and possibly into the Egyptians. I've never seen the phrase, but I have seen it in the Greek. And it's interesting to me that there are now actually recordings of the music of the spheres, which is the sound that the universe makes, the music the universe makes. And it is almost orchestral if you listen to it. And you can hear, you know, because it's the different vibrations and radiations of the planets and the meteors and everything else, and they make different sounds, and different sounds become part of it. And I find it fascinating that a concept that is minimum 3,000 years old, that we did not have the instruments to hear.
Yes.
Has now been validated 3,000 years later. I think there's a lot of things that have been perceived by mystics, psychics, what have you, many years ago, that we're only now being able to validate that there is this body of sound or life. I mean, the idea of, you know, the Kirlian photography, which shows that quite definitely there is, you know, an aura that comes off of our hands, or or if we cut a plant, that it still remembers where it used to be. And so, you know, this is all, the music of the spheres for many years was used to refer to the astrology, and I know that you are, you know, in deep study and understanding of astrology, and I'd really like you to explain to me what mythic astrology is.
Okay. Well, I want to honor my teacher, Wendy Ashley, my teacher in Mythic Astrology, who lives in Maine, which was very fortunate for me that I was able to study with her. Um, so Mythic Astrology is looking to the stars as well as the planets. We know that the planets are in astrological signs. They're the 12 signs of the zodiac. But there's also all the other constellations. Those 12 constellations of the zodiac are only the ones that are in the ring of the ecliptic, which is the plane that the sun and moon and the planets move through. But there are many other stars in the sky. And because of the phenomenon of the precession of the equinoxes, which means that there's a backward movement, precession instead of procession, a backward movement through the zodiac of the actual equinox points. And this is how we get the age, like the age of Aquarius. An age is 2,400 years or so. I've seen it expressed differently, but an age is a long period of time during which the spring equinox is in a particular sign. So it was in the sign of Aries, which is what we assume to be the spring equinox, is the beginning of Aries. And that was true for the Greeks. But over a couple thousand years, that point shifted into Pisces. So we've actually been in the age of Pisces the last 2,000 some years. And now we're moving into the age of Aquarius, so it moves backwards. And what that means is that although a planet could be in Aries, the stars of Pisces are there, no longer the stars of Aries, because it's really shifted against the background of the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that most astrologers don't make that shift, I mean, there are astrologers that work with that actual shift and would say that you aren't a Taurus, you're really an Aries, for instance. There are astrologers who would say that, but most astrologers have stayed with the spring equinox being Aries.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've lost our connection to the sky. That over this age of Pisces with Christianity, we haven't made a new connection to the stars. We don't have mythology for the stars as they are now. We've lost it. There was a time when we were intimately connected with the stars, and we've lost that connection. So in Mythic Astrology, we bring back the connection to the stars. And so at each of the planets in your chart and the ascendant and the midheaven, all the cardinal points, we locate the stars that are there. And the constellations of those stars all carry mythology. And we look for mythology that's relevant for your life. So, and they're
bringing this home to a personal level for individuals. So, is this something like Jean Shinoda Boland's "The Goddess Within You"?
It's something like that. That we all carry mythology. We all have a dimension that's bigger than we are, that is informing us. And for instance, I looked at your chart, mm-hmm. and you have this powerful Moon-Pluto conjunction. And when you have talked in earlier programs about your psychic abilities and how early that came up for you, and your attraction to the mystery, I just think of that Moon-Pluto. I mean, the moon is the part of you that it's instinctive and intuitive, and Pluto is the one who takes us beyond the everyday world into the world beyond, into the wherever it is that we go when we leave this world. Pluto being the what they call the god of the underworld. What's the underworld? I mean, it's just the place we don't know about. It's the unknown. It's what's beyond this world. And Pluto being the furthest out of the zodiac as we are most familiar with it, it takes us out then to whatever is beyond what we know. So your instinct for that is to me is in that Moon-Pluto. And there you have stars of the constellation Leo. They happen to also be in the sign of Leo, which is a really big constellation. But you also have stars of Leo. And so it means to me that you carry mythology of the lion and of the cat. And one of the stars that you have is, it's actually a star that's a little bit out from the eye of the lion. You know how the constellation Leo looks in the sky? It's like a silhouette of the Sphinx. It really has that big mane, and then the back, and then the tail. It's like seeing, and the paws. Mm-hmm. It's really like seeing the Sphinx from the side. And this star you have is the gaze of the Sphinx. So if you think of the Sphinx as having been there for longer than we know, I mean, the work of John Anthony West to expose the age of the Sphinx takes it back something like 10,500 years, not 4,500 years, because of the erosion on it. So the Sphinx has been sitting there and watching civilizations come and go, watching history, watching time, and there's something about you that has that has a knowledge or has a knowing of what that is, of what that witnessing through the ages is. And you're drawing on that with your moon, which is the most personal and emotional part of you. So you're tapped in. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's interesting. When I did the channeling for the Becoming an Oracle program for Nikki Scully, the first one I did was the Sphinx, and I took us into the Sphinx, into the chamber within, and it was an incredible transmission of wisdom and knowledge. And the Sphinx has always been, well, I mean, it's a big mystery, but it's also been one of those things that nobody has ever quite been able to explain why these people out should start carving this thing. You know, it's like it's so much bigger than anything they'd ever done before. And particularly whenever we're talking about possibly 9,500 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, when, you know, stone tools were a modern invention. And we look at that, and when you stand at the base of the Sphinx, and the Sphinx is way up over, I mean, you know, the stela in front of the Sphinx, for people who haven't been there, the stela that stands in front of the Sphinx and explains how he was dug out of the sands. The stela itself is taller than a human being, and that's just at the bottom of the Sphinx. It's just like covering a doorway there. The paws, as they stand out there, you stand even at the paw, you are barely taller than the Sphinx. And if you're a short person, you aren't. So and in there it's like a little cave, you know. So the Sphinx itself has this resonance to it. It's the memories of all the things that have happened in the last 10,000 years is, happened in its view. And when the miracle of the Sphinx is so incredible that our minds literally cannot wrap around it. It is beyond anything we can imagine. And when we see it, and this is the one thing I always hear from everybody who goes to Egypt is, I had no idea how big it was.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from with that.
So there's a mythic dimension that that I think it's so affirming to be in touch with it. Mm-hmm. And I guess I would say that in Wendy's work it's very important also to really be watching the sky, to be a naked eye astronomer, to be really seeing where the stars are and being able to recognize them, and keeping track of the moon's phases and the relationship along the horizon. And the Egyptians had a connection with the stars. Their way of measuring the year and keeping track of the day was all according to the stars. There are these 36 decans that mark the year, and yeah, decan is a 10-day period, but they were marked by a certain star. So they would watch every night and see what the star was that was rising just after sunset. They would be aware of the star that would rise just before the sun would rise, the heliacal rising, and they would also know which star was rising at the moment that the sun was at its nadir in the duat, when the sun was at that deepest place of night where it would regenerate and then be able to begin its way toward rising. So there's a certain star at any particular time of year that was called the Shen Duat star, and this work is this knowledge comes to me from Joanne Kahneman and her book Ancient Egyptian Sky Lore, that the Shen Duat star was the most sacred because that moment of the sun in the arms of Osiris in the Duat reviving was what kept life going. Mm-hmm. So they were watching for that star rising at that particular moment, and every night they would be watching for these stars, and every 10 days it would be a new one, and they would have lists of stars. I mean, the connection to the stars has been, for all ancient cultures, the source of the mythology that has meaning for them. So this work of the Mythic Astrology reconnects us to that memory and that lost connection that we had.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the fact here in San Diego we have the Dark Skies Initiative. We have a Mount Palomar, which is a observatory that's about 80 years old. And because it's so old, it can't deal with the loom of light you normally get in a city. And so we have special street lights here that do not shoot loom up into the sky, and they they work in fact they don't have street lights in a lot of places here. So because of the fact that the goal is to keep the skies as dark as possible. But, you know, one of the things that I know is that I had the experience whenever I was in quite some time ago with my husband. We went to Lake Powell, and we were on Lake Powell with our boat. And there you have no loom of light. You only have the stars. And it was magnificent. I mean, you could read, the moon was not even up, and you could practically read a book or a newspaper from the light of the stars. You know, we really do not have a concept of how many stars are in the sky because most of us live in cities. And in cities, we see the brightest stars, and sometimes we see planets and think they're the stars. But we don't see the incredible stretch of the Milky Way. You know, I mean, how many people have actually seen the Milky Way lately even, you know? When I was in Bend, Oregon, I went out with my grandkids, and it was at the time when the Milky Way lays directly in a north-south manner over that area, and you could lay down, and it was like you could, it felt like you could lay there and reach up and touch the Milky Way. You know, it was so present. And of course, you know, we have the night sky arching over us in a way that we don't really experience because, as you said, we've really lost, and particularly with the electric lights, we have lost so much of our connection to the night sky and to the use of the night sky. I mean, even as a navigator on a boat, you know, I learned how to navigate based upon the stars. But the truth is, most of the time, what you do is you navigate based on the GPS. You know,
Right.
you just pray that those satellites are in the right places. By the way, off the coast of Mexico, they're not. If you follow the GPS, you will be on shore. So it's just a word of warning down there in the Bay of Contepec. But it's, you know, it's seeing the night sky is an experience that I really don't think most of us have anymore. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm wondering how we can bring that back. I mean, I just don't know if there's a way to bring back the mystery, not just the mystery, but the experience of connecting to what it really looks like at night when there's no light around.
Well, I'm very fortunate where I live here in Maine because we really do have dark skies, and I do see the Milky Way frequently. When the moon is full, then it's too bright to see it, but when the moon is not in the sky and it's a clear night, the stars here are very, very bright. And so I, for years, when I had a dog and would have to walk her at night, I was just walking with my head up and getting to know the stars. That's a big part of the study, because astrology tends to be focused on the piece of paper and the wheel, and even that we can actually reclaim our connection to the horizon. So I wanted to show you this wheel that one of my students made for me, an artist named Jody King, and I use it in teaching. So it has the signs of the zodiac on the outside, which is sort of how we see them painted on the sky. And on the inside, this wheel that turns is the Earth. And so here's this is east, and this is west. And so what we experience as the sun rising and the moon rising, here is the horizon line, here and here. And so we experience ourselves as still and the sky turning around us like this.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, we're the ones turning, and we turn like that. So, and there are 12 signs of the zodiac and 24 hours in our day of turning all the way around. So every 2 hours, there's another sign on the horizon. And and that's why the time is so important. When you have your chart done, you need to have to know what time you're born, because it makes a big difference, because all the planets are in the sky, and it's Earth that's turning. And I asked her to use this image, which I found in Lucy Lamy's book Egyptian Mysteries, of Nut, who is the sky. So her body has all of the stars in it, and Geb, who is the earth. And in this image, it looks like he's doing a somersault, which says to me that they did know that the earth was turning underneath this arc of the sky.
I want to bring Raven in here because she has a very special connection to Newt. Raven, are you willing to talk?
Well, to me, Newt as the sky goddess, the way that she, and I have seen her, I've been fortunate enough to be out in dark as well and to see that sky. And when I was a child growing up in Wyoming, I slept outside every night in the summer so that I could look at the stars. So I feel like she's always called to me. But for me, Newt is the Great Mother, where we are all a star from her body that have come here, and we will all go back a star to her body. And for me to know that she is arching over us is such a comforting thought. It's so easy to feel so small in such a vast world, but Newt is such a, like you say, she's like a container. She's over us and holding us and keeping us from flying out places unknown. So she's very special to me. And recently my cat, who I named Newt, well, not recently, she died a little over a year ago. She died on the spring equinox not this one, last year. I was very bereft of her being gone. And I was just, maybe a week after she died, I was praying, and I called in the Earth Mother, Newt, and I looked up, invoking her, and I saw my Newt like a little cat constellation frolicking in Mother Newt's starry something for me, because I thought we're all going to be there.
That's beautiful. Yes, I also think of her as a mother. And when I learned the myth of Nut and Geb and how they were lovers and were always together until Shu, the air, the atmosphere separated them, I had this understanding of the constellations as her love letters to the earth, and that there are messages for us in the stars, and all that grows on the earth as the earth's love letters for her, and that all of that communication and all of that life could only happen because of the separation. So it was also for me a teaching about separation and how much creativity comes because of the space between.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me has always been, and of course I've studied the Egyptian myths since I was a very little girl, and the only thing has been fascinating to me, again, like I was talking about the idea of the music of the seers, is connecting the myth with today's scientific reality and seeing how what they perceived was actually the reality of how things are. You know, the separation, the earth being separated from the sky, and the whole thing. But it's like there's this tremendous understanding that was somehow embodied in the ancient Egyptians that we don't value. I mean, we have it, but we don't really value it. The ancient Mesopotamians, Tamians as well, the understanding they had of the star bodies, of the ancient Indian traditions, that we're sort of like, oh well, that's old myth stuff, and it doesn't. But if you unpack it, you find out that it's just different names for the same stuff.
Yes.
And so I really, as this mythic astrology is really exciting to me. I mean, it's something that I feel like I haven't studied, but I have an intuitive relationship with. I've always felt that my relationship with Osiris, with the constellation of not Osiris. What's the right name, Raven?
Orion.
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 Right, and the dog star. My relationship with those that particular constellation is much stronger than anything that's in our orbit. It's it's like that's home. In a real sense, that's home. That's where I came from, and that this realm here is foreign in some ways. And I know that I have friends who are very attached to the Pleiadians, to the Seven Sisters, and they feel that's home. So it's like there's something out there, and I think this mythic astrology maybe brings it back into focus, I guess is the right word for it. Am I right or wrong, or am I totally off base?
No, you're right. You're right. It brings it into consciousness, that the stars are also connected to us and that they have meaning for us. And then there's there's all kinds of mythology. I mean, there's Egyptian mythology, there's Greek mythology. Most of our Western culture comes out of the Greek mythology, but then there's Norse mythology and Native American mythology and Indian and Chinese, and I mean it would be, it would take many lifetimes to learn them all, but it's kind of a treasure hunt when I work with a chart and a person's life to find mythology that is relevant for them. You mentioned Ion's opera Io and Her and the Trouble with Him, and that grew out of Ion's connection to her myth of Io. And Io is the Greek myth of the priestess who is then raped by Zeus and then turned into a cow by, I think, by Hera, and then guarded over by this thousand-eyed monster Argus, who Mercury comes to the rescue and manages to put all those eyes out by telling story after story after story. But then Io goes to Egypt, and in Egypt she takes her place and really merges with Isis and Hathor. So that Hathor, the divine cow. So that myth, when she made the opera, I had the pleasure of being the voice of Io. Io was done as by a dancer. It was really a dance opera, but then I provided the voice but my role was also the role of Memnosine, the memory. So the one who remembers, the one who connects, who brings back what may have been lost, what may have been forgotten, and that's I like that role for myself, thinking of the one who can, even though I forget all kinds of things. There's a lot I forget, but in some way, by my interest and study of the archaeoastronomy and the ancient times and ancient cultures, I help us to remember some of what was lost, and that's part of my priestess work.
There was a wonderful book. Well, it was a good book. All right, called "She Who Remembers," and that was written a number of years ago. And I didn't care much the book. It was one of these fake romances set in Native American terms, and but I love the title, "She Who Remembers," and it was because memory has always been such an important part of my life. I had not eidetic memory, but I had audio. In other words, if I heard something, I would remember it for long times, to the point that I could repeat conversations that had been held years before, word for word. And that primarily comes out of an abused childhood where it was really important to hear what people said, and because at a later time it could be used against you. You know, and the memory thing is, you know, it's like the Sphinx is about memory. I mean,
right. Yeah.
It is the container for our memories in many ways. That it's, you know, there's the indication that there might be a chamber underneath the paw, or there might be something that is contained therein. But, you know, even as we step away from the Egyptian tradition, we go down to South America, there's the tradition of I just went blank. The things that they tie, and each one of those was to tell a story, and it would be for memory. And we have the tradition in Africa that, you know, the shells and the different pieces of that were used, they contained a memory. Because it's like, you know, you pick up a bit of a shell, and the bit of the shell tells the story about the time whenever, you know, the people lived in the ocean.
Can I ask Andrea a question?
Yes.
Can I ask the question? So, Andrea, there's a tradition, I think, in Australia of the boundaries being sung.
The song lines?
That? The song lines, yeah, okay.
Yes.
And what do you know about those?
Well, I only know Bruce Chatwin's book. I don't have any first-hand experience of that, but I was enchanted by that concept that one could find one's orientation by knowing the song of a place, and that every place and every journey has its song. That's very evocative for me, though I don't know that I would. I for whatever reason, have to make things up myself. So rather than learning a tradition, I would love to be, and I actually have done some intuitive singing of places, and intuitive or channeled singing of specific journeys or spots on the earth. But I don't know that much about Australia. I just found that concept to be really inspiring.
I do. I think it's incredible. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, and also even that there are still people on the earth who have that deep connection to the earth, so that they would know the songs and know their way that way. I mean, that is so hopeful to me.
but I think part of the song lines is also the stars, because I think that part of that is their ability to follow the stars and know where the stars are in the sky on any particular time, so that they can find where they are going. I don't know that much about it either, and if anybody is here from Australia, I apologize because I really don't know that much. My experience with it is extremely surface, but it's still fascinating. And one of the things that I liked whenever we did Becoming an Oracle was I got to go all the way around the world and do oracles from everywhere. And that is, my knowledge is basically an inch deep and a mile wide. So, there's a few things I know a lot about, but most things I know a little bit about. So, so if we're coming up here to, I hate ending this conversation. It's a wonderful conversation, and I'd love to know more. And but if someone is interested in getting a reading from you, do you do that?
Oh yes, and I've been doing more and more over Skype, which is so nice because we can see each other like this, and I can be in Maine and communicate with someone anywhere in the world. So yes, that is definitely possible. Yeah.
So how would someone get in touch with you if they wanted to? So through your ruby-throated.
Rubythroatedspirit.com is my website, and there's a contact page that has my phone number there and email, and people are welcome to call me or to email me. I'd be very happy to be in touch.
Yeah. So just to wrap this up this evening, the idea behind the Mythic Astrology fascinates me, and I know that we've got a program that we're going to be offering shortly here, which is your teachings of that, and we will be having that available for our audience. So do you teach this anytime other than, do you have classes that you teach?
Well, I actually just had, I have a class in New York that has been ongoing, and I just had my New York students here in Maine for a retreat to study the Mythic Astrology. The program that we're offering actually isn't so much the mythic, it's more basic astrology. It's working with the symbols of the planets and the astrological signs and the houses. And I've written a song for each planet. So it's part of the teaching that I sing the song before speaking about it. So I let you know that I'm going to sing the song for Venus, but I don't tell you what Venus symbolizes. I sing the song first, and then there's an opportunity to write down one's associations just from the music, and that's, well, the class is a recording of a first class with my students, so that you'll hear then their associations, and then I talk about the planet. So it's a little bit different than a traditional class, that it's got the singing in there. But then I also teach privately in various ways. One thing that I've done is called Planet Speaks, where we work with your chart and we take one planet at a time. So we might begin with the sun, and we would talk about the sun, the sign that your sun is in, the house, any aspects it has, and also any stars that are important for your sun. And then after we stop talking, we get off the phone or the Skype, then you ask your sun what it has to tell you, and you just write whatever comes to you. You allow the sun to speak to you intuitively, and you'll find out so much more about the symbol of what that sun means for you in that way. And the thing is that one thing about astrology that I think is so important to mention is that each chart is unique, that each person is his or her own world. And so it's very, very affirming to find out your own astrology, because you realize that the way you are is exactly the way you are, the way your soul chose you to be. Because, well, my belief is that our souls choose the moment we're born because the specific pattern of energies serves our soul's aspirations. So, so that affirmation of who you are. And then the other thing is, as you look at the transits and the planets moving, you see that things are always evolving, always shifting and changing and growing and opening and developing and releasing, and that nothing is truly stuck, that there is a process that we're continually experiencing. And I think that's very comforting and reassuring. And knowing one's own chart and knowing how different another person's is very helpful in having compassion for each other, because we each see things in our own way, and we each have our own challenges and our own gifts, our own resources to draw on.
We'll have to bring you back and talk about putting two charts together, because it just occurred to me that we haven't talked about that at all. And obviously you have a wealth of knowledge about, okay, so here's my chart, here's Raven's chart. What does that mean whenever we're, in relationship?
Yeah.
And so this is, to me this is fascinating. I've been studying astrology in a dilettante fashion since I was 9 years old. I actually almost got thrown out of high school for making star charts. That was followed by almost getting thrown out of middle school for doing palmistry.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, this is, it's a long time fascination, and it's a fascination that I'm delighted that you're bringing a new aspect to, and so you're truly remarkable. Information is, wow. I really find that so. Obviously, I have to come. I guess I have to come to Maine to learn about Mythic Astrology. Are you going to do that?
We can have phones or Skype sessions. Yes.
It's kind of like,
Well, I think it'd be more fun. Let's just go to Maine.
I think we should at least go to New York. I mean, there is something coming up in New York.
Yes, we're having a big retreat. I mean, big in depth and glory, I'll say. We're having, our Ministry of Mott is having a wonderful retreat in November 21st to 23rd, the Woman of the Duat. And it's at a really nice retreat center that's called Life Bridge in upstate New York. So if people are interested in that, we have space, and we would love you to come. And I will be teaching Mythic Astrology at the retreat, and also facilitating sound healing. So that's my part of it, and we work with dreams, and we do all manner of healing work, and their teachings, and Egyptian mythology, and spiritual connectedness in many ways, divine presence of the God.
I want to go. My problem is I want to go to everything.
Yes.
It's like, can we possibly get... Okay, if we could get my RV back on the road, then we could just do a road trip, and we could just go to all these different events, and that's my goal in life. I am moving on from the boat. I would like to have something so we can go to all the goddess events and all the priestess events, and then we can also have the goddess ranch to come back to. So I really want people to, you know, for the Women of the Duat, is that on your website or is that on IONS? I think it's only on.
It's on the ministryofmahat.org
Okay.
website.
All right. So they can get that there. And, you know, I really want to thank you for being present and working through the technical difficulties that we had today. You know, we're learning. I can manage to get people one time at a week. And,
well, you're doing remarkably, and I have to thank my friend John Trees for solving my issue earlier today.
Yeah, we could get her on visually. She could hear, or I could hear her, but she couldn't hear me. So we were looking at the possibility of having to do a phone call at the same time, and that was not going to work. But anyway, thank you for being on. And next week we have another Andrea who's going to be on, Andrea Adams Miller. She is the owner of the Red Carpet Connection. She's also a very interesting woman who only wears red all the time. And she's a witch, and she is going to be on and telling us about all the things that are going on in her life. She's got some interesting experiences and challenges, and as we all do. But she'll be with us next week on Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific time, and we will have to have Andrea back on, so we can talk about the next level and this and how we can figure out how our relationships work with Mythic Astrology. I'm delighted to have you back on. Ione is going to be on, I believe, either the last Tuesday in September 30th. My brother's birthday. So she's going to be on, and totally extraneous information. And we have, let's see, Susan. Oh, I just went blank. I'm sorry. One of the authors from Stepping Into Ourselves will be on the week after that, and she was not able to join us during the telesummit, so I'm delighted to have her as well. Raven, thank you so much for your support. You are always my spiritual support, my backup. I don't know what I would do without you. So
well, I'm glad I didn't have to take over. I'm glad you could hang in there.
Yeah.
Bronchitis, and she's not been well.
Yeah. So
work of 12 people. So.
Yeah. So anyway, I thank you both, and I thank everyone who's listening and everyone who will be listening. One of the things I'm very delighted with is the number of people who are listening after the show and sharing this program with their friends. You know, that's the way we grow. And so please continue to listen and share it with your friends and tell us what you like and ask us questions. And as we move on into the program, we have a membership site called Gathering of Priestesses. It's gatheringofpriestesses.com. And it has all of the audio programs that we have done previously, the first 21, available to you. So these will be available on YouTube for some time to come. And we are going to be here, as I said, Tuesday nights now. From now on, we're looking at creating a radio show. I have a meeting tomorrow morning with Ann Key and Kimberly Moore. We're looking at how we can create a university institute program that will allow us to deliver our classes in a very high level of capability, so that we can have interactive programs or have programs that are recorded and delivered to you over a period of time. And both Raven and Andrea have programs which we will be delivering as programs. So delighted you could both be here. Thank you so much, and thank you. And for those of you who just tuned in, go back and watch the beginning. It is good. And thank you so much.